First things first, why are the people in this room successful? American agriculture from 1776 to roughly World War II, that was the greatest economic expansion ever in human history. You ever give any thought to why that is the case? Well, here's a hint. This is a list of every war that happened in Europe for that 150-year period that interfered with food supplies somewhere on the continent. Here's a list of all the wars in North America that did the same thing. Let's look at why that happened. Why Europe had so much of a problem feeding themselves and why the United States and Canada had no problem whatsoever. It really comes down to this big area right in the middle of the continent. We, of course, know this is the greater Midwest. It's the largest chunk of arable land on the planet. But more important than the ability to grow food is the ability to get it from A to B. Moving things from A to B is very difficult. Look at the blue on this map. The interconnected waterways of the Mississippi Basin, the intercoastal waterways. Collectively, that's about 16,000 miles of waterway. Now, moving goods from A to B on land, if you have a rail system, if you have a road network, is still 15 times as expensive as moving them via water. And this network here is the largest network in the world. In fact, it has more miles of waterway than the rest of the world put together. This is a system that is nice and secure as well. There's deserts that separate us from Mexico, forests and lakes from Canada. You've got oceans on both sides. It's really hard to invade the United States. It hasn't been tried in the last 200 years. You put it all together, and you get a political and economic system that cannot fail, despite the best interests and the best effort of whoever they elect. And for the last 22 years, wow, have we had some doozies. You Canadians, don't snicker too much. I've been watching your system too. And then here's Europe. Northern European Plain's a nice area. It grows quite a bit of crop, but it's much thinner. In fact, from north to south at its thickest point, it's only about as thick as Iowa is. Where are my Iowans? No one from Iowa this time? Oh, one. Hey, Marshalltown, peace out. Anyway, but the rivers in Europe are not interconnected like the Mississippi. They cross the Northern European plain south to north. Very few of them interconnect. So you have French rivers and German rivers and Dutch rivers and Polish rivers. Each one is separate. And when you have countries like that are basically in each other's faces, because there's no separation, the German border is the Dutch heartland. You get a very different method for interacting with the world and interacting with each other. You have to establish lines of supply independent of your neighbors, whereas Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois, we're all in the same basket. And so you get what we in the United States consider to be ancient history. You get the imperial system, where the British Navy guards British trade with the British colonies, and the French Navy trades with French colonies guarded by the French Navy, and they don't interact if they can help it, because they don't want to become dependent on someone else that might go to war with them in the near future. And so they always buy from the United States. So until 1945, this is how the world worked. And for the United States and Canada, it was absolutely brilliant. And then we went and messed it all up. In 1945, the United States changed the way the world worked. At the end of World War II, we said, okay, no more of this imperial crap. We're tired of the world going to war every few years because somebody has a bug up their butt. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to allow everyone to trade with everyone else. We're going to open our market, not just the largest market that the world has ever seen, but the only market to survive the war. The US consumer market at that time was twice the size of the rest of the world put together. And then we're going to use our Navy, the only one that survived the war, to guarantee that trade for everybody. For the European allies, this was a dream come true. And for the Germans and the Japanese, this was very confusing because they had just fought a very serious military conflict to get just this. It was like, you really should have brought this up in 1929. We could have avoided a lot of problems. Why could the United States make this happen? Well, it's pretty straightforward. This is a jump carrier, traditional jump carrier. There's 10 of those in the world, none of them are American. This is a super carrier. There's 10 of these in the world. Each one has over 5 times the combat capability of one of these guys. There's 10 of them. They're all American. In 1944 and in 2014, the United States has a stronger blue water projection Navy than the rest of the planet put together. And if you were to sail the entire global Navy against the United States, it would only take a couple of American task forces and it would all be over in a few hours. That balance of power has not changed in 70 years. So this system exists because the Americans made it. But that doesn't mean that the Americans use it all that much. And actually, it's the worst possible system for the people in this room. The green areas are the areas where it's easy to grow crops. Winter is harsh enough to kill the bugs, but not harsh enough to drive the people away. Summer is warm enough so the crops can ripen, but not so warm that things catch on fire. Rain is relatively common. Transport is relatively easy. Those are the green areas. These are the areas that grew crops reliably before 1945. You'll notice that the single biggest chunk of that, of course, is the United States. The purple areas are areas that you can grow things, but you really have to put your back into it and your checkbook. The soil is rockier, the winters are harsher, it may be subtropical. You can make these places green, but it's very, very expensive, and you have to apply extra fertilizer, extra pesticide every single year to make it go. What we did with Bretton Woods is allow the purple areas to develop, because they were no longer colonies, they were independent countries. They were no longer the targets of wars, they were the targets of investment. And your competitive advantage degraded considerably. Brazil, India, China all became economic superpowers in their own way. The key thing to remember about Bretton Woods when you're talking about it today, though, is we don't use it. As a percentage of GDP, the United States is one of the most isolated economies in the world, despite being the largest by a factor of 3. As a percentage of GDP, the only 3 countries in the world that are less interconnected than we are Brazil, South Sudan, and Rwanda. That's it. Even Afghanistan is more wired than we are. Best part, this green line, our imports, 1/3 of that is energy. That's disappearing very quickly. For the remainder, 1/3 of it is NAFTA. Basically, a near domestic situation. Okay, so that's piece 1. The United States controls the system, created the system, but doesn't use the system. And the only reason the system is still there is because of the cool heads in Washington.